Good afternoon. Please welcome to the stage General Manager for Digital Transformation of Corporate, External, and Legal Affairs at Microsoft and a member of the CLOC Board of Directors, Jason Barnwell.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our super session. And this is going to be truly a super session. CLOC's Education Advisory Council has developed these elevated sessions to bring forward key topics that this community has asked for. And we are proud to partner with Ironclad to bring you this really exciting discussion led by the one and only Mario Carroll. It's going to feature leaders from Ironclad, Citibank, Orange Theory, and OpenAI. Ever heard of them? So we brought these experts together to give you a peek around the corner, and they are turning the future into the now. So we want to leave CGI better equipped to help lead your organizations so they thrive in the change that is happening now and is starting to really accelerate. Before we unleash them, let's do a little prompt engineering by offering some context. So knowledge management, why does it matter? It's valuable because it lets our organizations produce better decisions at scale with less cost. Good KM optimizes for our fundamental constraints: human time and cognition. KM, it's critical for our business because demand is increasing, resources are not. And the faster your business goes, the more KM matters because you're making more decisions. The value of those decisions compounds. So even a slightly better decision consistently delivered can create far more value for the enterprise over time. This discussion matters because KM is serious business. But knowledge management, it's always been hard. It's been hard for the legal profession because we ask people who like to operate like artists to paint within our numbers. And that's particularly challenging for experts who are trained to be elite critical thinkers. So that's why what's happening in AI development is a special moment for our industry. AI capabilities like large language models let us apply machine intelligence to reason over and generate words in ways that create exceptional business value because they can meet our people where they are. This reduces the change cost. We're really starting to use the human API, also known as words. And this can radically accelerate your KM investments time to value. But we need to be the people in our organizations who are thinking about how we get there, if this is really going to land. So, this is why we have assembled an incredible panel of thinkers. They will share their insights on how AI is transforming knowledge management and our industry. And I predict they will give you questions to take back to your organizations that set you up for even more success. So with that, please join me in welcoming our colleagues and enjoy the show.
Welcome to our session on AI. Thank you, Jason, for the wonderful introduction. We are going to dive in and get really honest today. I've asked all of our speakers to open up, do hot takes, be really transparent. But what comes with that, just as a preface, is that all the opinions expressed by our speakers today are personal opinions and no reflection of the views of their organizations, and mine too. So with that, we're going to get started with a little video to frame our conversation because it wouldn't be an Ironclad session without a hello from my good friend, Alex Su.
Thanks, Mary. We're here at the floor of CLOC, and we're about to talk to some legal ops pros about knowledge management. Let's hear what they have to say about it.
I run the division, so I know where things are. And for other people, of course, they come to me because I know where they are.
That should be in my job description, right? It's like professional finder.
Any kind of CLM or database, that's my first go-to. Then SharePoint sites, Google storage, shared sites.
You know when someone goes to share their screen, and they share the whole screen, and then you see it, and you're like, oh my God, there's just documents. It's like a murder scene.
Some of our team members save on a C drive.
C drives, S drives, G drives.
One guy I found rebuilt a whole CMS. So folders, there was architecture. He's like, then I take it here, then I scrub it there.
And then I end up talking to people. What do you have? Where do you have it? Oh, I store it in Salesforce. Salesforce has documents?
We got Pool IT to do the Vault search.
From backups and everything?
Yeah, from backups.
Oh,
It's like digging for gold. And then when you find it, it's like, yes!
Yeah, legal people are hoarders. If we were to do an original series, it should be Hoarders Legal Edition, where you go to the back of the truck and you're like, let go of your files, just put them in the truck. You don't need all of this paper.
Is this problem getting better with all the tools and technology that you're adding to it?
Think of a corral of chickens running around with their heads cut off. If you add another chicken with their head cut off, does that make it better? You tell me.
So as you can see, lots of challenges. Is there a solution? I hope so. Back to you, Mary.
Thanks so much, Alex. Let's give it up for Alex. All right, let's just dive right in. We'll do a quick introduction, who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then we'll get into the KM stuff. Charlene, let's start with you.
Yep, so I'm Charlene Barone. I'm the Director of Legal Operations and Strategy at Orange Theory Fitness, and I basically coordinate the chaos. I think that's how I'll put it.
Hi, I'm Jason Kwon. I'm the General Counsel at OpenAI. I do legal things.
Hi, I'm Christina Wojcik. I'm the Director of Innovation and Technology for Citi's Global Legal Department. More importantly for this audience, I am the Debbie Downer. I am the fun police. So it'll be a really interesting conversation today.
Looking forward to that. I'm Jason. I'm the CEO at Ironclad, and I'm one of the co-founders.
All right, so we prepped, we got together, we talked about all the stuff that was happening. We talked about what Jason, there's a lot of Jason. So JB is going to be JB, Jason Boehmig, that was Jason Barnwell. But Jason Barnwell framed up what knowledge management is, why it's important. We talked about that as we got together for this session, a couple weeks ago. But then we just sat down like 30 minutes ago and said, you know what? Let's call an audible, because all anybody wants to talk about is AI. That's all we want to talk about, so let's talk about AI. And what we all know is that AI is having an incredible impact on knowledge work and knowledge management, and it's going to change the way anything that everyone does happens. And so with that, let's talk about generative AI and how it's going to impact our future. But maybe we start with, Charlene, I know that you had a great story about how you would define knowledge. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Larry Prusek, who's the former director of knowledge management for NASA, he described it in a really interesting way. So he said, imagine that you're having a dinner party for friends and you're following a recipe. In terms of the recipe, he defined data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And so data are essentially the words that are on the recipe, right? So each word individually can provide a little bit of context, but not a whole lot. And then you have information. And information is when you start putting those pieces of data together, and it starts telling a story. And in this example, it's like giving you the directions to execute the meal. Then there is knowledge, and knowledge is actually when you do the cooking. So putting that information to use and actually utilizing the information. And then he said wisdom is marrying a cook. But I think in my instance, it would actually be ordering Uber Eats.
So I actually wanted to jump on something that Charlene said in her intro, which is the chaos of knowledge management. And in the financial industry, there is no chaos, right? We're cool, calm, collected. Everything is going just fine right now. And so when we think about it, it's about the complexity, right, of working within an organization that has over 220,000 employees representing over 100 different countries, with plus or minus 2,000-ish members of our legal organization, and all of the rules and controls and restrictions that we have about sharing of information, even internally, the information that we're getting from external parties. And so how do you organize that in a way, allowing people who are allowed to see certain things to see those certain things, and making sure that we have control functions on top of all those other things that people can't see across borders. So it's incredibly complex, and it's not as easy as, let's just throw AI on it and fix it. Like that's the easy answer, right? And what do we do with something that's not an easy problem?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good point. So when people talk about generative AI, they talk about it kind of doing work, and it, the way that we kind of like to talk about it is that it replaces tasks, it doesn't replace jobs, and so the things that you're talking about, AI is not going to solve those problems in terms of who gets access to this information, where is it going to be stored, what locations is it going to be available in. People are still going to have to make these decisions about what it is they actually want, what is the actual goal, how do we make our colleagues and clients happy, and these are things that ultimately people still need to do, and the tools, I think, here will help those things come into fruition faster, more efficiently, a little bit more reliably, perhaps, but ultimately, at the end of the day, these are the kinds of things that you can sort of start to focus on more as you kind of think about this transition.
So are you saying there's hope for civilization?
I am.
Well, it's really interesting because when we think about looking at the categories of AI, like with predictive analytics or with generative AI, and what a green field and new field it is for a lot of us. I had a conversation within one of my networking groups a couple of months ago, and this individual was talking about how they are going forward with using generative AI within their legal department. And like, how did you do that? How did you get that cleared? How did you get permission? What controls did you put around it? Like, tell me, I need to understand so that way I can help shape some of the conversations we are having with our AI Center of Excellence in our legal organization. And she's like, I'm just going to ask forgiveness.
Absolutely.
And it's just, and I like to talk to myself in my head, and I'm like, okay, I start using it, I'm using production data, something gets leaked, exposed, hacked, breached, fill in the blank. I get called to the principal's office, the general counsel, so hey, Christina, tell me about what happened. And what am I going to do? Sorry. It's not a good thing to be, trying these things unless it's in a very controlled space.
So I've got a hot take on that one, which is I think there are better areas to be saying sorry in than others. In that, one of the things we've seen customers get a lot of value of is third-party NDA review, and they can put third-party document through the AI, and the review time comes down from 40 minutes to 2 minutes. And the risk that's associated with that is very low. Even in the worst case scenario, it's a third-party NDA. It's not anyone's core business to be looking at third-party NDA language. And that feels like a place where people are starting to get comfortable with the early applications and assuming some of the risk, but maybe a little bit less risk than a sales contract or something like that.
And I want to echo a little bit of that as well. So Christina, how do you see it as different than any other technology that you're experimenting with? Because there's data involved, whether it's AI or not. Is it the same or different?
No, it's a little bit different, right? So when we're talking about when you don't have the generative AI and you have more of the machine learning, natural language processing, latent semantic indexing, especially in the contract space, it's a more mature kind of field. But what we're trying to understand is when you're using those types of technologies, you're training the tool to make predictive kind of estimations on what you're looking for. And so you just need to constantly make sure that the machine isn't learning away from what you originally taught it to do. Whereas when you're looking at generative AI, is it telling you the truth, right? And how do you validate that that's actually telling you the truth and that you have confidence over the truth that it's telling you? So it's a little bit different in terms of how we have to approach it, where if we see that a model is moving away from termination language, not a lot of risk to the financial markets, but if we rely on generative AI saying, yeah, you can totally do that, and here's how you say it, and we didn't fact check that, then that could be a problem.
But, sorry, no. I was going to say, so don't you think that having it as a tool to at least get you started, right? So maybe not rely on it 100%, but say, hey, can you put this together for me, and then have someone double check it. I feel like you might gain a lot of time by doing that.
I mean, it depends on how it's connected into your internal systems, right? So are you using your work computer for that, and what type of access, and what type of prompts are you using, and where is it pulling that information from? Personal computer, write this for me, and there's less risk to breaches or exposure. But I think there's been luckily very few instances where there have been kind of the oopses and information that had gotten out into the market that wasn't supposed to be there from other organizations.
Yeah.
So I think this highlights that each organization has its own set of internal trade-offs. So the risks and the benefits that they are willing to accept, and it may vary by sector, it may vary by their client base, it might vary based on the employee size and all of that. So I'm just kind of wondering from your guys' perspective, since it seems like you're sort of on a little bit of a different parts of the spectrum, how you would think about how each organization can kind of walk through how to use it, where to deploy it, how to roll it out, how not to roll it out. Very curious.
Yeah, so our organization is a little bit more open-minded, I guess, when it comes to the AI. There's a lot of things that we want to accomplish, and we acknowledge that in order to make a significant impact, we need the help, right? And so AI is really providing that. We do have a little bit of guardrails, but it's really unmarked territory, right? So like we're putting these guardrails, but are they really guardrails? I mean, we're just kind of making it up as we go along, right, with AI. And so, yeah, I mean, it's more of an open-minded approach of like, okay, let's try this and see how it works out. We have a policy in place which limits how we can use it, but that's, I think it depends on who you speak to. So you might say, like, I know the policy says this, but I found this really cool thing that we can do. And so certain people will be more flexible than others.
And during our preparation for this session, I confess that this is probably one of the most uncomfortable positions I've ever been in, because I'm always at the do it, right? So when I was in an industry when we were just starting the offshore of legal work, right? We're like, this is going to work. This makes sense, just do it, right? And years and years later, it obviously does. I was in an industry when we were kind of inventing the category for AI and contract analytics. And at that time, the colleagues and the competitors and peers are basically like, hold our beer, right? This is going to happen. And now it's, if you don't have that in your solution or as part of your recommendations or process, you are behind. So now I'm sitting here and saying, like the old statesman, like, slow down there, kids, right? Let's really think about this and making sure that we have the proper safeguards around it. And one of the analogies I've been using throughout the conference is, this is one of the races that I'm happy with a solid third, right? You're still on the podium, but you're allowing some others to kick the tires a little bit more, and there's a lot of outstanding questions that haven't been explored yet on the legal side, and I'm sure these are questions you get every single day, and we're just going to stay calm, continue on, and figure out alternatives to how best manage our knowledge until that time.
Yeah, Jason, how have you dealt with that problem as like, you have kind of this remarkable convergence of at OpenAI, also running the legal department, and like there's so many interplays between risk and the adoption of AI.
Yeah, so it's both internal and external. So internally, there's definitely usage of these systems and tools, and it's the researchers are very enthusiastic about certain use cases, and a lot of times we're excited too. There are definitely a few times where members of legal or members of security have been, maybe we should pause on that one, but the benefit of that is it also kind of puts us closer to, I think, some of the questions that you all are kind of dealing with. As we're an organization too, we have various sort of policies and thinking on security, systems, access, how information is stored, how reliable can it be, and so because we are also using it, it kind of puts us in that mindset of how is a user going to kind of think about this in their organization. And then externally, I think there are lots of different companies, they think about it differently, a lot of different opinions, and I think it kind of drives home the fact that this is all new. There's a lot of learning going on, and like a lot of other software waves that have happened before, starting from Steve Jobs and dealing with sort of his hobbyists to the Linux open source sort of revolution, all of this is going to have to start with community. There's going to be a lot of people here and throughout your peer set where you're talking about how you're deploying these tools, and talking to each other is still a really underrated thing, but it's probably more important than ever.
And I'm curious, like, one of the conversations I've been having throughout the conference is where the role that the legal department is having in the adoption of AI for the business, and it seems like it may be a little bit reversed, where usually we're the last to get things, and we're sort of the first to get business results out of AI. I'm curious what you see and what y'all see in terms of that being true in your businesses, and also in the broader technological landscape of AI. I've had folks in the technological community come up to me and say, this is a really interesting application. How does that unfold?
In terms of the legal departments using this, or?
Yeah, well, like, what's the perception among AI researchers as to the applicability of the technology to the legal question?
Yeah.
Is that something you're hearing, or is that just our own speculation here.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that the researchers are thinking about too, because the ones that work on it, they're not doing it just because it's an interesting intellectual exercise, although it is a very interesting intellectual exercise. They're trying to do things that actually sort of superpower the people that we depend on in our lives, and certainly lawyers are part of that, and people in the legal profession are part of that. And so how do we help this profession deliver better results, do it in a way that's more empathetic, faster, and it's just helps the people that are trying to help other people do a much better job. And so I think that because it's language, and that's what these models are good at, and because law is practiced through that medium, it was definitely one of the first things that I think people were thinking about as potentially transformative.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting on the technology side is that I think that in the current market of solution providers that are building that in, a lot of them are really focused on the upside of what can happen in the CLM space. And where we're really starting to see some of the differentiation are those organizations that aren't scared by the questions that I have to ask in order to use that technology for the work that I need to do and have the validation that I need through our model risk management assessment. So when we have conversations with Ironclad and like-minded organizations, can I see how your models are working?
Yeah.
Can I see the confidence scores? Can I see the precision, recall? Can I see the accuracy? And if the answer to that is like, well, no, that's a back-end function, then I can't go forward, right? I have to be able to understand how these things are working, so that way I can give my supervisors, the risk and controls organization, confidence that the software is performing as expected.
Yeah. And what's funny about that is, like, as a technology leader, I feel like often customers or prospects come up to me and almost act apologetic that, like, hey, we're really going to grill you on this stuff. And I'm like, I love it. Because there's so much noise in the industry. Yeah. And actually, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but last year everyone was talking about AI too. And there's clearly a different viewpoint because it's real this time. And the technological underpinnings are completely different, thanks to the work of OpenAI largely. But I think we're at this convergence where the sophistication is emerging among buyers, and the technological competency is also there, that we can really affect the change.
I think it's so fascinating, and JB and I had this conversation at some point about the fact, or maybe it was all of us, about the fact that if you would have asked us what automation and AI would have replaced, we would have thought really like routine, mundane, step one, step two, that kind of thing. And yet it's replacing lawyers or like the most creative type roles like graphic designers and artists and writers. And, that's not something we would have predicted. Is that, I just loved your thoughts and comments on that. Anyone?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one in that, I think most people would have thought, if you had asked them 10, 20 years ago, what is AI going to replace and, or do, it would be kind of more robotics-driven kind of tasks. And it turns out actually all the motor controls and all that you need to get very right are much more challenging than having this kind of deep learning approach where it learns language. And it might also just have to do with a little bit of, to your point, the reliability of these systems, in that there are a lot of things that you do with language where some amount of fuzziness, good enough, is actually good enough. And there are certain use cases where it's not. And so I think that might be one of the reasons why, is because there's a softness sometimes to the things that you expect in terms of the results.
I mean, I remember the early days when sitting on a panel, and probably the very early CLOC days, where we'd present on, the robots come in peace, right?
Yeah.
And the robots could barely find a force majeure provision at the time, and we're like, oh, what's going to happen, right? It was kind of chaotic, and now that's just the icing, or that's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's a very different conversation in such a short period of time.
That was a cause to us, actually, that viewpoint. I had a conversation with Sam Altman, your CEO, I think before GPT-3 came out. And he said that exact thing, and that's what caused us to send Kai to basically spend 100% of his time on AI, and like really, really go deep, because it is really counterintuitive.
So what do we think comes next? I mean, that was a big question that everyone's been asking me and talking about this whole week, which is, okay, so if AI can do so much of the legal work, what does that mean for the lawyer work? What does lawyering 2.0 look like? And I know a lot of you guys have thoughts because we talked about this already.
Yeah, I can say with not so much lawyering, but like from my perspective, it's just if I can give an example of when we recently used the AI feature actually in Ironclad, we were working on an initiative. We have 1,000 templates that we were trying to essentially consolidate. So just from some context, Orange Theory has about 1,500 studios, and we're located in all 50 states. And so that just growing quickly accumulated to 1,000 membership agreement templates. And we targeted to have a consolidation effort completed in about 6 months' time. While Ironclad came out with this feature of AI, and I was like, okay, this is not the traditional use case, but like, let's see if we can use it. And we were able to leverage the AI and save about 3 months worth of time in this project. And I was like, I can do more stuff now. Like, I wasn't worried about it taking my job. I was like, yay, I can do more meaningful work now.
That's right.
I'm not so concerned about like, comparing templates and is this language in this. I mean, so it was, it was pretty significant. And then I took that to my GC, and he was a little hesitant about, I think, AI, but once I showed him that, he was like, all right, what else can we do? Like, what else can we sign up for? So yeah, it was a good experience.
Are you tracking at all sort of the productivity gains that you're seeing a little bit, or is it still somewhat anecdotal?
Yeah, anecdotal. We're not really tracking. I mean, I had to give a presentation because I did have to justify, like, okay, we want to start using this AI feature, and our CTO was actually really interested in it. He doesn't really get involved in legal, but when I told him it was AI, he was like, okay, yeah, like, let's sit down and talk about it and see how you're really using it. And he was impressed. He was like, yeah, this is like definitely something that we can use it for. So I feel like tracking will be coming soon because I also think that other departments are going to want to leverage that and say, hey, look what legal did.
Yes.
So like we want to be able to do the same thing in our department.
Just a side note, like that's what strategic operations is that I've been preaching for the last year. Like when your CEO takes notice of what legal is doing, you're doing it right. Sorry.
Well, can you like go one more layer down on that? Like what was the moment in that meeting where you convinced the GC and like got the CTO's attention? Because I feel like that's what a lot of the room is trying to accomplish. And like, was it a demo? Was it like a presentation? Like what was the moment that changed the mind?
So it started as a conversation. When I discovered I was like AI assist, I was trying to figure out how to use it. I finally was able to use it. And I did like a really small demo with our GC. And I said like, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing. And he was like, okay, yeah, that looks good. All right. Wasn't totally impressed on it, but I was like, oh, watch. And so as I said, we have templates in all 50 states. And so I took one state, which Texas is one of our larger markets. And I said, I'm going to consolidate all of the Texas templates. And so I was able to do that. And I had told him that it would take me about a month to do. Well, when I came back to him in a week, he was like, wait, you're done already? Like, that's impressive. And so I kind of talked him through the process, and this is what I did, and yeah, it kind of went from there. So then our CTO, we had a conversation separate to that, just about AI in general. And I was like, oh yeah, by the way, I didn't mention this to you, but I'm also using AI for this. And that's when he sat down with me and was like, okay, like, show me what you're using it for. And then he also was like, this is awesome. Like, yeah, more power to you.
And what are you seeing from your customer base in terms of, because they consist a lot of people in legal ops and also in the legal departments. Curious in terms of what they're seeing in how it makes their jobs better, how they're getting efficiencies and all of that, because you do have metrics tracking in your platform.
So I think what we're seeing is like the beginnings of truly massive productivity gains. And it's just the beginnings, and it's unclear how long it'll take to unfold, but the beginnings are here. So we started the company in 2014. In the past 8.5 years, through a bunch of incredible automation and like collaboration features, we were pushing about 3x better efficiency. So like folks are working 3x more efficiently through that tooling. Our goal with the company was to get to 10x. Like, would have been happy if we got to 10x better lives and better efficiency for legal teams over the entire life of the company. The data, like from the field in production, is for certain types of agreements, we're now 20x more effective through AI. So it's 40 minutes to 2 minutes. It's not 0 minutes because we still want that 2-minute lawyer review, and it's smartly architected into the system. But that's something that I would have thought would have taken a decade if you asked me a year ago. And I think it's the path from expanding that from the beginnings, like third-party NDAs, to the whole corpus of contracts across the 1,400 companies we work with and the millions of companies around the globe. It seems very obvious. Like, it's as linear as it was to do the automation. So I think it's a matter of time and technology.
Do you see more activity? And so the reason I asked that question is, so one of the things that, when I've talked to Sam about this before in the past is when we first came out with tools that help people code, there was sort of similar concerns about, what do software developers do? But it turns out they just write more code. And so just kind of wondering how you're seeing that playing out.
So I think speculatively, I do think we'll write more contracts, but those contracts will be more in the background. And to maybe extend the analogy farther than it should be extended, I think like when we go to a web page, there's all sorts of code loading in the background. And I kind of think that that's how contract language is to business. Like, it's a necessary part of business, but it should be loading in the background as opposed to the forefront of a business relationship. And you need it to run the website. You need a contractor on your business. So I think that's kind of how we're thinking about it, is like it should be ubiquitous. It should be everywhere. And that's good for the legal team. That's good for protecting the company from risk. But the more in the background you can put it, the faster your business can move and the more effectively you can operate.
It's interesting because, going back to one of your questions, Mary, like how is it going to impact the lawyers? With a lot of highly regulated organizations and industries, it's who owns the documents, who owns the contracts, and oftentimes it's not legal, right? So the mass quantities of the documents are sitting outside the legal department. So when there's a big regulatory initiative, it's not legal's responsibility to go find those documents. It's legal's responsibility to receive the documents that are impacted by whatever that change might be. And from my perspective, oftentimes there are opportunities to improve our search functions capabilities, our abilities to use AI to pull the appropriate documents that are related because it has the provision that needs to exist or does exist or needs to be changed. And if the business doesn't have the proper technology stack to get that right, what's sent to legal is a lot of things that need to be cultivated through or curated, right, in order to find the documents that are actually impacted. So if we don't have those upstream systems with the ability to find, there's cull through mass quantities of data for the pertinent things, what we get in legal is an incredibly large bill from our providers to help us curate that content to make sure that we are being appropriately responsive. So it's this really interesting partnership between legal and the business. So while the AI that helps us curate the contract type data might not sit with legal, the benefit to legal downstream is significant.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the thing that is the essential prerequisite to the delivering the benefits AI is great systems up front. And even with Ironclad, like one of the things that we've spent probably years developing is a docx editor in the browser, which sounds really simple and is really complicated to build. And it has been described by some of our engineers as the hardest CS problem they've ever worked on. Whereas the results of AI everyone loves to talk about, but that's actually the delivery mechanism for AI. And if you're just using a Word plugin, like it's disconnected from your systems, it doesn't actually get the data in as cohesive of a way. And I think the analogy extends to the business at large. Like you have to think about the whole assembly line of data and systems, not just the flashy part with AI.
Yeah, and then once the changes are made, how do you make sure you feed that back up the stream to ensure that the changes are properly captured within whatever the repository of choice are? Because oftentimes it's not the repositories that we would need oftentimes aren't supported by some of the providers that aren't built for an enterprise, right? Yep. You don't know what an enterprise is until you have tens of millions of documents that are legacy and millions of documents that could be created on an annual basis. That's where the fun starts. That's where the fun starts.
So one of the things I do want us to address, since this is called the new era of knowledge management, and there's probably a lot of people who are like, wait, I thought I came here to talk about knowledge management, is that, and I mentioned this if anyone was in my session yesterday, AI has the ability to kill off things like knowledge management as a key pillar of what we think about and what we do, because if you have the right systems and processes in place now, even with technology, not even AI, like you should be able to capture a lot of knowledge automatically in the background, as your example, like you don't have to think about it anymore. And JB made an interesting comment as we were meeting about the fact that like maybe knowledge work was never really about knowledge work until now, and it was all actually knowledge management, curating, getting everything in one place. And now with AI and like sort of automating knowledge management as it is, we will allow lawyers to actually do some of the knowledge work.
Yeah, I think where I was going with that is that having practiced law before, there's been a necessary component of the practice of law that is data manipulation, like tasks. And it's been inseparable because you need the context from those tasks in order to actually do the 2 minutes of legal work. And if we have tools like artificial intelligence that can deliver that context without having the human need to do the task itself, that may be a much more effective and enjoyable way of working that still is doing knowledge management, but is parting out the components of it to different resources.
And this is my Debbie Downer moment. We're not going to be using AI or generative AI in the near future for knowledge management, but that doesn't mean the work stops, right? So how do we approach it and prepare ourselves for the point? Because, you know, I say all the time, there's going to come a time where you can't flip the switch off for AI. It's going to be just intrinsic in everything that we do. So until we get, when we get there, we need to be prepared. So, you know, I kind of think about the 4 C's of like knowledge management, right? So consolidate where you can, where appropriate, where there's proper controls around it. Curate, right? Now that you kind of have it in the spot, what do you need to keep? What has a records retention policy, if it does or does not? What's redundant? What can be archived? What can you get rid of? Cultivate. You've got new stuff coming in all the time. Like, so you need to have a process in which you put that knowledge, that wisdom in the right spots for the right people to see at the right times to help drive efficient decisions and advisory within the legal organization. And then finally, culture, right? Knowledge management, you can put together however many working groups that you want, but if you don't have each individual taking ownership of the wisdom, the knowledge that they are creating or they have access to in an organization of our size, it just will never be successful. So then put that in a cycle, right, and constantly update it. But how do you hold individuals accountable to make sure that they are participating in a way that allows their wisdom, their expertise to go into the right place so others can benefit from it?
Yeah, love it. So we were originally going to call this session the end of knowledge management and be really dramatic. And Christina's like, can we not do that? I just doubled down on like growing my knowledge management team. I can't go on a panel. But as we were talking, it comes kind of full circle, right? Because in order to get ready for the end of knowledge management and to be able to leverage tools like AI, you have to get your house in order and you have to actually do the consolidation, the centralization, the curation. So knowledge management actually in some ways becomes more important in the near term so that you can get rid of it in the long term. Is that right, Kwon?
Well, I think where we wound up on that was that it is both the end of knowledge management and the beginning of knowledge management. Yeah. And there are cycles to all things. And I think we are in a transitional moment and a transitional maybe decade of how knowledge management might become more effective. Yeah. Because I think the depressing part about knowledge management, maybe to be the downer for a moment.
Welcome to the club.
is I feel like as someone who has used knowledge management, it doesn't feel like it's reached its true potential. Like, we all need to be managing knowledge all the time to be doing our jobs more effectively. And I loved Jason's intro where it was like little decisions applied across scale can have a huge effect. And I think what AI might enable us to do over the long term is to more effectively do knowledge management and bring the knowledge to the point where it's most effective. Like that's what we see through our playbooks, which is we're able to take these things that often exist, which are like, one customer had a 80-page PDF. And guess what? Not everyone read the PDF all the time. So we basically spliced up the PDF into parts that could be delivered where they were contextually relevant, and then a lot more people actually used the PDF, but it wasn't a PDF anymore. So I think that there's like delivering the same content in a more effective and more contextual way, and AI may play a part in that.
Yeah, the interaction mode is maybe something that will change about this. So it's not that you can necessarily say, hey, now all the knowledge collection will happen passively in the background. I think what Christine's saying is very right. You do still have to make a bunch of decisions about where the information resides and who has access and things like that. But currently, when you're doing knowledge management, you sort of have this sea of tools, and there are buttons and text fields, and you got to learn these things, and then there's search, and this is sort of how we do that today. But what may happen as we kind of transition into all of this is you may just have a chat interface that's connected to all these systems, and then you're able to interact with knowledge, not sort of in a mode where you have to think about what are you searching for, what are you trying to surface, but you are starting to kind of inquire and kind of get into a dialogue with the system, and it kind of is a more naturalistic way of getting knowledge, sort of like the way that we have been accustomed to learning about things when talking to each other. And so I think that might be one of the ways in this really shifts.
So does the information have to be structured in a specific way in order to leverage AI, or it's just
well, I think that
plug it in?
Yeah, there's a question of how to connect the systems together so that they're able to talk to each other, and you kind of see that today with the plug-in feature that you see on ChatGPT, which is it lets you plug into other apps like OpenTable and Zillow and things like that. But you would have to build the connectors, I think, into these systems, and then once you do that, then it's able to kind of be this more sort of interface as opposed to just kind of summarizing the material.
Do you think we'll have less tools in legal, more tools in legal?
It's a great question. I sort of think that we'll probably end up with more, because if it's true that you can use this new technology to interface with the tool set more efficiently and effectively, then the value of each tool actually is, it delivers more value, because it might cut down or eliminate training costs, and it might reduce sort of the friction that everybody sort of feels when there's a new tool that has to be sort of introduced into the workplace. So I think that's a possibility.
I think there's going to be few platforms, because I don't think everyone can handle the mental load of the siloed tools. But if we think about phones, that was a disruptive technology. And it consolidated a lot of previously separate technology. There was, the flip phone. There was the notepad in your pocket. There's the flashlight. There's a text messaging device. There was an MP3 player. There was a digital camera. And all of a sudden, all of those things are in our pocket. But maybe it depends on how you define tool, because now we have a proliferation of apps. And there's way more applications than there ever were, but there's a fewer number of devices where those applications get delivered. And I think that's my view, is I think there's going to be more platforms, there's going to be dominant platforms that enable more tools to exist on those platforms.
Super interesting. You guys, I'm just realizing that we're out of time. I didn't even ask anyone if they had any questions, and I had so much fun talking to you guys. So thank you so much. I want to call Jason Barnwell back up to close us off, but let's give a big round of applause to our speakers. Thank you.
Wow, y'all got into it.
There's a lot to talk about.
I was.
Would you like us to keep going?
I kind of do. I was out there furiously scribbling notes. I was like, man, this is so. I heard a whole bunch of things. First of all, Jason Boehmig, I'm so sorry about the word add-in hassle. I'll go talk to some people. We'll get there. So I'm hearing that people are already delivering outcomes now. This is not just academic. Things are happening. I'm hearing go find workloads that you can start partying on safely, right? Find things where the failure mode is something that's completely appropriate. Turns out AI needs humans to actually understand and manage our data to do the amazing things. So it's not they're just these autonomous things that fix all the problems. It turns out that you actually do have to plan for human engagement, and we need to understand our data, govern it, and start thinking where we're going to put humans in the loop to make these things incredibly powerful. I'm also hearing like it's okay to be curious about how these machines work. You can kind of get into it, and people they'll get us smarter. If we want to go faster, we need to do that as community. We need to learn from each other. We need to share. We need to be proactive about that. And also, look, if the self-proclaimed Debbie Downer is talking about not when and how, but not if, then I need to get on it, right? Because it's time to go. Wow, this was just amazing. Please, thank you so much to our panelists for bringing this truly elevated conversation. It was just so impressive. I think I've learned a ton. I hope you all have too. Thank you so much to Ironclad for bringing this session to us today. I think it was incredibly powerful. Can we give our folks some applause? All right. So we are looking forward to continuing this conversation in the networking reception in the exhibit hall. I'll see you there. Thanks, y'all.